Hello, and welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you brought your library cards, my loves. Don't know why I did that sort of bad Dick Van Dyke. Is there a good Dick Van Dyke? I don't think there is. I think bad Dick Van Dyke is almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it? It sort of cancels it out, but hey-ho. Welcome back, as I say, to The Library is Open. It's Sunday afternoon. It's actually late afternoon. It's about 4:45, and it's book club tonight, so I'm filming this in advance. I actually wasn't going to film this today, but then I realised I didn't do a video last week, and sort of suffer from guilt a little bit. That's not to put that on people that watch, if I don't make semi-regular content, because I get this sort of like, I've read a lot of stuff and there's things I want to talk about and then I don't get on. It's kind of self-guilt whereby I'm just feel like I'm storing up more work for myself later on. So here I am, the result of guilt. And what have I been doing? I'm very busy with work, but I'm also very late to the party with Sex Education on Netflix, which is an excellent series. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend. I'm aware that, as I say, it's been on for ages now and pretty much universally acclaimed. But, you know, when have I ever got into anything when it's popular? So, there we are. Yeah, so been doing a lot of that just to try and keep my stress levels in order. Clearly not working, because I have a huge spot. I'll point it out before anybody mentions it. I have a huge spot at the side of my nose, Vesuvian in appearance, if you will, and I think you will, which is just perfect. So that's nice for me, isn't it? Thank goodness I'm still wearing a face mask at work, otherwise it'd be a huge tragedy. But hey ho, we carry on, don't we? We carry on. So I sort of ummed and ahed about the title of this video, mentioning like sort of anti-heroines, because I sort of don't really know what that means. I mean, I do intellectually know what that means, but I sort of think, is an anti-heroine or an anti-hero, whatever, essentially based on a set of standards that we have for characters, or, you know, sort of desirable outcomes and things, and is it a little bit judgmental? But I thought I'd just go with the title anyway to see what you think, because I'm really interested in sort of interrogating those terms, and it kind of seemed to fit with the theme of the 3 books that I'm going to talk about today. All of which, as you know, I'm an unintentionally thematic reader. I don't necessarily plan it. It just so happens that I find consistencies and or points of reference across books. So, perhaps you'll agree, perhaps you won't, but isn't that the nature of discussion? So, hey-ho. So yeah, what did I read recently in those hours I could snatch away for myself? So first up, I read, which I have mentioned before on this channel, the fabulous Lisa Taddeo's, or Taddeo, I'm not quite sure, her first fictional novel, Anemone. You may remember, I've mentioned in the past, she did write 3 Women, but that was actually based on factual information. So I really enjoyed that when I read it last year, I want to say. So I was really eager to pick up the sort of debut novel. And I suppose this is where the anti-heroine thing kind of came from in a way, because I think I read it in a review. I can't remember who it was. It was someone famous anyway, like on the blurb of the book. Oh, it's Elizabeth Day. Sorry, it's on the front cover. Joan that's our protagonist, is an unforgettable anti-heroine. I don't think I'll ever stop thinking about her. I would agree in many respects that she is an incredible lead character. Let me tell you a little bit of what it's about. I'll read from the inside cover. So the first line is, "I am depraved, I hope you like me." Same, Joan. 36, Joan knows more than most the price of pleasure, the horror of being a woman at the mercy of a man. She knows men too, their penchant for cruelty, the violence she has absorbed over decades that now threatens to burst from her own hands. I won't read the full thing. Basically what happens is, so there's this woman that we meet, and she is on the run, I suppose would be a good phrase, from New York, her former lover having committed suicide in front of her. It's not for the faint-hearted, this. If there are any particular issues that you find triggering, be advised on that. And she finds herself in California in this kind of pseudo hippie kind of disparate community. And we learn that she's looking for a woman who is a yoga instructor. She gets a part-time job and so on and so forth. And then she's getting these abusive calls and texts from her former lover's wife, who says that their daughter is in pursuit of her, basically, and she's going to kill her. And what sort of happens is we sort of unwind how Joan ended up becoming the person that she is, and who all these people actually are in relation to her. We sort of like drip feed that information as we go through the book, and we learn the kind of trials and tribulations that she's been through as a woman in what, you know, we might stereotypically call it a man's world, as it were. It's very much about the violence, I guess, of existence, and although it is framed in this narrative of women's experiences, I think it's definitely applicable further, expanding that kind of reach. It's hard hitting. It's really it's beautifully bleak, I suppose, would be a good way to describe it. And it's a sort of, it's almost a mystery, but I sort of don't want to frame it like that, because it's not a mystery in the traditional sense, but it's more that you are, or rather we as the reader are led to, you know, sort of form opinions on Joan's behaviour, look for justifications and so on and so forth. And then as we progress through the novel, we start to learn more about why she is the way she is, why where she's headed is seemingly almost fateful, if you will, and also to kind of unpack the sort of darkness in the center of her own heart that led her onto this trajectory. Now, that the sort of anti-heroine thing, I suppose, comes from the fact that she's quite au fait with, or rather unfazed by, the prospect of violence, and also the what would I say, the kind of, if I was like not a Quaker, if like a Mormon or something, I might say loose morality or something like that. But actually, I think it opens up a really interesting conversation about how morality is constructed based on your own experience, isn't it? You know, I don't necessarily find her an unlikable character. I think she's completely relatable in many respects based on what she's been through, and I'm really interested in where those kind of standards of what makes someone a hero or an anti-hero come from, you know, because they're not innate, they can't be innate. There's no innate knowledge of anything that is sociological, not to sound like an essay. So it's constructed from somewhere. So anyone who's then in opposition to that is anti that. Again, this is not a critique of the blurb or anything like that, but yeah, I just found that really, really interesting. It's peopled with very well drawn characters and a sort of joyful sense of the macabre, and a kind of enjoyment of the animal instincts of the human that I think oftentimes we would like to distance ourselves from, without realizing that often the ways we respond to things are entirely instinctive and predicated on self-preservation, you know. Hope that makes some kind of sense. It did in my head, but that's not necessarily an indicator. But no, I really, really liked this. I would love to read more of Lisa Taddeo's work, sorry, or either or, when it comes out, because I just think she's really fascinating. There's also a lovely essay in the back of this edition. I say essay, it's like an afterword, where she talks about why she writes the way she writes, because Three Women was also sort of shot through with violence and this idea of women being subjugated by both circumstance and other people. And she writes, she says, basically, she got asked a lot when she wrote Three Women, why are their stories so sad? Why did you choose those sad women? And she sort of says, few things bewilder me more than when people ask those questions about the characters. The thing that happens when you listen to people at length, when you ask them questions about their deepest cuts, is that they tell you about them. They tell you things that they walk around holding all day and that others can't see. And their cuts, basically, the things that are the deepest cuts. Animal became for me a way to show the way that cuts, both small and large, deepen and manifest and metastasize over time to become canal depth stripes. And these stripes are the markings of an animal, of a woman in this case, turning into the very beast she has been whipped and or caged into being. So I think that probably sums up better than my description did where this book is kind of going, but I absolutely do recommend it, particularly if you're looking for a somber kind of meditation on the truth of what happens after those sort of big life-defining events and what the culture around you and within you is. Hopefully that makes sense. So this was the first of my anti-heroine reads. I followed it up with, this is I suppose more obviously anti-heroine, and again it's another one I've mentioned before, so I got an itchy palm. It's The First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker, which has also been featured, I believe, in A Most Anticipated. And the reason I said that she's probably more of a you know, straightforward anti-heroine is that our protagonist is a child killer. But what I think Nancy Tucker, who is recent graduate of Oxford, according to her bio, she works in psychology, basically. It's her first book, as I say, and what I think she does beautifully is to present the story without a moral judgment from the beginning. We're never coerced into going, oh, this person is a monster. I mean, debatably, is anybody truly a monster, or does that really just depend on what your standards for monsters are, or humanity? Is that not an experiential thing? That's not me trying to defend anything that we condemn societally necessarily. It's just about asking questions. So we get two alternative sort of timelines. We get our first introduction is to Chrissy, who is in her childhood, and this is not a spoiler because she says it in chapter 1. She kills a little boy from her local area. And then we flip to the perspective of Julia, who we gradually realise is Chrissy as an adult who now has a child, basically, which is a really, really interesting paradigm, I think. Obviously, she's been through, you know, what do they call it? It's not prisoners, it's like young offenders institutions and group homes and so on and so forth, and come out the other end, and this is who she is now. So we sort of get, as I say, those two dual timelines, why she did what she did, where she is now. But it's just so much more than a sort of you end up empathizing very much with the character of Chrissy, even though you know she's murdered another child. When she was a child herself, I should make that plain. She was 8 years old and she kills a toddler. But it's not quite that simple. It's again, as with Animal, very much a product of her circumstances and the things that she's encountered and the regard she has for life, I guess, generally speaking. Like, I suppose it asks questions about how are you supposed to just instinctively value life if you've been taught that your life has no value. I think that's what we're saying with this novel. It's actually compelling, and it almost reads like a thriller, because particularly with the chapters of her as a child, because she actually doesn't get caught as the killer till the very end. So it's kind of weird because you know what's coming because you've already read her adult perspective, but you sort of, there's still that kind of element of, will she get away with it? Will she get away with it? Of course she won't get away with it because we know what happens, but I think that's really quite skillful of the author to leave you guessing in that respect. I just think it's beautifully described because when she talks about this sense of power, She talks a lot about the power and the excitement that comes with these things she does, e.g. the murder and other things that subsequently happen. She talks about this fizzing kind of sherbet feeling, which, as I say, I'm interpreting as power. Somebody claiming power that was powerless. You know, and I imagine that can be quite intoxicating in many ways. You know, and then it's sort of sympathetically looks at what the trajectory of somebody's life is when we can't imagine them having dimensions that are not related to the crime. You know, and I'm aware that this is a really emotive and evocative topic. You know, can you have not ambivalent, but can you have a kind of question mark around your opinion on someone who's done something that we as a wider society think of as so heinous, i.e. the murder of a child? So I think that's really interesting sociologically, sorry. God, I'm doing a PhD today, aren't I? In terms of how we conceptualize childhood wildly as well. Like, it's widely acknowledged, I would say, that violence or any kind of mistreatment of a child is seen as like one of the gravest crimes. But then we sort of have to think, don't we, about how recent, how modern our concept, relatively speaking, of what childhood is has been created. You know, the sort of idea of childhood as a separate space of life is only kind of, I don't know, was it the last 150 years? Prior to that, you were just small adults. So in creating a separate space of life, you become a privileged person. That becomes a privileged position to occupy. Therefore, anything that threatens it is very, very hard to assimilate. Often because children are vulnerable and don't have power, but socially we've taken a lot of that power away because we've decided they're not old enough for it yet. So just very interesting. And again, not saying anything about the real life application of this. I'm purely talking about how it's shown in this book. I thought this was beautiful. It sounds so strange to say it, doesn't it, as with violence, but you know, visceral, violent and complex emotional things can be so beautiful because, you know, the best works of art, as with, in my opinion, the best teaching, asks questions rather than gives you answers. So I thought this was an absolute difficult joy, you know. Let me know if you read this and how you feel about the character of Chrissy/Julia, and how you recognise your own socialised responses to things that happen, and then debate how they came to be and feel instinctive. So there we go. Nancy took her the first day of spring. Bravo. Will definitely be picking up her next book. Finally, this one, very much not an anti-heroine, but kind of felt like it tied into the this trio. And this is, I saw somebody talking about this on Twitter. I know why, because they're adapting it into a stage production. I can't remember exactly who it is, but I will Google it and link it in the description. This is Little Scratch by Rebecca Watson, which is a kind of stream of consciousness novel. This smells like Lush bath bombs because I bought it on the same day that I went to Lush, and I was accidentally sprayed as I was pushing past somebody and they were testing out the perfumes. So that was nice. Luckily, it didn't go in my eye, but hey-ho. So this is a really, really interesting kind of James Joycean kind of, as I say, stream of consciousness novel about a woman's day from the moment she wakes up to the moment she falls asleep again. But it's not presented in terms of a coherent work of fiction as we might recognise it. But it's literally her thoughts on the page. I'll show you an example as they occur to her. So sometimes there's like 3 different things going on at once, and you have to sort of decide which order you're going to read them in. It beautifully kind of illustrates how I think your brain works. Well, I think how it illustrates if your brain works, if you tend to think in sentences and language. I know some people think purely visually, but I suppose that doesn't really work in a book. And over the course, so she works at, she lives in London, she wakes up and she goes to work, where she works for a publishing company where she's like an assistant. No, it's not a yes, it is publishing, it's newspaper publishing, sorry, a journalism publishing. And she basically goes about quite a boring day, answering the phone on WhatsApp to her partner, and she kind of lives out the trajectory of that whole day of being awake period. As we go through, we meet her boss and we discover that her boss has raped her at a party. And from there, we kind of revisit the start of her day again with this fresh knowledge and recognise how that's impacting on her. She hasn't told her boyfriend, she hasn't told anybody, in fact, and she has to face him in the office every day. And it's about these conversations that she's having internally with herself while she negotiates, you know, the rest of her life. And what I loved about this was not only the really clear, distinctive voice that doesn't feel the need to spell it out to us, but also the way that, again, things we conceptualise, like assault and things like that, are, I can only speak from my own experience, obviously, are not necessarily the primary focus all the time of your day. You are constantly aware that it happened. You are constantly aware that it happened to you. It is not the only thing in your brain all the time, at least not in my experience. Obviously everybody's is individual and different. I don't want to take that ownership of your, or authorship, away from anybody, but it sort of delves into how huge and how small that can be at the same time, how absolutely world-changing it can be, but also how it doesn't affect the minutiae of your everyday life. So yeah, I thought that was fascinating, and I recognised that more in this book than I do in the kind of, you know, the way we see it shown on television or in film, generally speaking. It felt more akin, I don't want to say truthful, because I can't speak to a universal truth on that experience, but it felt more in line with, as I say, what I recognise. Now, if you like this or not, the little scratch of the title, by the way, comes from the fact that one of the manifestations, I think, of her preoccupation or way of dealing with the trauma, while not having the space to deal with the trauma of that, because oftentimes we don't have the space to deal with trauma. We have to just carry on. So our body finds ways to do that for us. She is constantly scratching her legs, and so that's where the little scratch comes from, and it's almost becomes like a mania behavior that she just tries to control and she can't, which is kind of metaphor for the whole thing. And but yeah, if you're going to, enjoy is the wrong word with things like this, isn't it? Experience, let's go with experience this. Is it will depend on how much you need to feel like you conceptually understand text, I suppose, or how you have to understand text to enjoy something or appreciate it. This is more in line with something like Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newbury Port than it is with, for instance, any of the other books in this kind of video. It is very esoteric, it's very existential, it goes all over the place. Parts of it are WhatsApp messages that are happening at the same time as her thinking about lunch and things like that. And as I say, you've got to read across two columns, but as a depiction of a person on a day where the trauma of something that has happened, the violence of something that has happened, is not the only plot point. I think it's beautiful. Again, beautiful, strange word, isn't it, for such horrific acts against someone. But there is a beauty in claiming ownership of those stories, I think. Feel free to disagree. And, you know, I thought this was really rather incredibly done. So, yeah, bravo, Rebecca Watson. Little Scratch. Again, another debut novel, I think. Yeah. I marvellous. So there you go, slightly sombre selection of books this time, but I'm not... See, I've said scratching now and I'm scratching my palms so much. There must be something to the power of suggestion. But yeah, as I say, a slightly sombre selection of books, but I think an important selection of books, particularly if you are interested in kind of probing beneath the surface of what we accept as dominant narratives on things, particularly, as I say, relating to traumatic experience or, you know, individual responses to seemingly unthinkable situations. So there we go. Slight interruption there, but I'm back. Just to sort of say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe we'll have some slightly cheerier subject matter next time. But now I'm off to get ready for our book club this evening. So put your library card somewhere safe, my loves, somewhere waterproof as well, because it's very definitely autumn now, or fall if you're in America. And or spring, is it spring at the moment in Australia? Yes, I believe, and New Zealand, possibly, correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, have a lovely week. I'm gonna try and get rid of my spot by drinking lots of water. I've been alternating between water and coffee on this because I am what? Inconsistent. But yes, as I say, time to get ready for book club. But thank you for joining me as always, and I will try and be prompt and regular with bringing out my content. Okay, until next time, lots of love, look after yourselves and be safe. Mwah.